Someone sorting silverware?
That would be at my house.
Can we blame it on Polly?
Yeah. It's her dinner time.
Well, I suppose we can get started without Thomas. Did anybody hear from him that he was going to be here or not be here?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead and convene the July 28th meeting of the Ridgway Planning Commission. Karen, would you take the roll, please?
Yes. Okay, Commissioner Emerson, absent. Falk, absent. Commissioner Lisk,
Here.
Commissioner Nelson,
Here.
Councilor Cheek,
Here.
Mayor Clark,
Here.
and Chairperson Kenwright.
Here.
Okay.
Okay, the first public hearing is application for a sketch plan. The location is block 28, lot 16 through 20. The address is 283 North Cora Street, zone historic residential HR. The applicant is Mac McIsaac. The owner is Matt McIsaac. Okay.
All right, so this is an application for a sketch plan, which is a proposed planned unit development. Let me share my screen with you so you can see the staff report here and the location. Oh, there's so many windows open. The location is just north of that one. There we go. The location is just north of like the building where Kate's Place is and the Grammy building across there from Voyager. So on North Cora and Charles, it's a quarter block. This proposed plan unit development includes dividing the property into 6 different pieces of property. So kind of south and north, 1 property to the south, and then 6 different parcels on the north, which would be 6 different townhome units. And you guys likely recall we did a sketch plan for this this exact development on July 30th of 2019, so almost exactly a year ago. But as you'll recall, sketch plans expire after 6 months, so that one has expired, and the applicant is still moving forward with this development and has kind of come back to renew this sketch plan approval. So I probably will go over this fairly quickly just because I believe you have all seen this before, but I'm happy to answer questions or go back to things and cover them in detail if that is helpful for you all. So let's see. Generally, when we're reviewing a sketch plan, we look at our subdivision regulations, which is 745A. It includes things like conformance with the master plan, which there's a number of items that are pulled out in the staff report that show kind of compliance with our master plan, that this project is really in line with the overall vision of the master plan. The historic residential zoning regulations. So this is something that has actually changed since a year ago. As you guys will recall, we've just adopted new regulations in our zoning code, and those are now in effect. So I will go over this a little bit. Currently in the historic residential district, up to 4 townhouse dwelling units are allowed, and anything over 4 is a conditional use. So with doing 6 units, the applicant is requesting a conditional use for this particular project. In terms of lot width, lot size, and lot coverage, these are all really interesting. When you consider the 6, if you were to consider that the lot was just being split in half, with the southern lot having just the existing unit and garage that's on it now, and the northern lot having those 6 townhouse dwellings. The regulations in terms of lot width, minimum lot size, and lot coverage are actually met However, when you divide that northern lot into those 6 individual lots, there is a need for multiple variances here. So for example, a variance for the 4 internal lots for lot width, our new regulation allows 25 feet lot widths, and the 2 end units are 28, but the interiors are 21. So again, a variance for those 4 middle units. And then in terms of lot size, a variance is being requested for all 6 of them. Together, the lot size is large enough, but when splitting them up, it is not large enough. Let's see here. The maximum lot coverage in the historic residential district is 50% for this type of development. When considering all the lots together, the 6 units, it's pushing that. It's at 48.6%. But if you take each lot individually, the outside lots are 55% and the inside lots are 41%. This makes sense because, you know, the way it's laid out, there's a little bit of open space on each side of the building on the end units, but the middle units are really, they're townhouses. So their lot lines are their walls. So variance is being requested for the 4 internal lots where lot coverage would be about 55%, which is just over the 50% requirement. Front setbacks will be met. The side setbacks will be met for the building as a whole, but those interior units are going to be at a 0 lot line. So variance is requested for that. Rear setbacks are also going to be met. You may recall, if you looked at the last report that we did for this, there was a request for a variance for the side lot line abutting the alley to have a variance, but that's no longer necessary with our revised code. Maximum height is allowed up to 35 feet. We need to be sure it's measured right. So there's a note in the staff report to be sure that is addressed. Let's see, the staff report goes on to talk a little bit about how different processes could work here, and that this is probably the most efficient way to go about this when creating townhouse lots. It's a little bit unique. You know, the lots typically follow those the building lines on either side, but then you have a little room on the front and the back. And the plan is to create individual lots so people could own their units and their lots here. I'm going to stop the share for a second just because I'm going to scroll through a bunch of pages and notes. Don't want to make anybody dizzy here. So there are some existing drainage issues that we've talked about on North Core Street and Charles Street. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for this development, that just is going to need to be addressed. The culvert may need to be enlarged that goes under Charles Street and some other stuff, and the applicant will be somewhat responsible for that, and we'll need to sort out all those details. Utilities are available pretty easily because this is kind of an infill project right in the middle of town. That's pretty simple. One thing that I did call out that we need to talk about is the sewer service. I thought the plan was to have every 2 units share a sewer line, meaning one line and tap to the main line, but the plans kind of show that differently. So that will just need to be reconciled and clarified here. The applicant provided some cost estimates. We included some notes to the applicant in the staff report about that, just to be sure that, you know, everything is included, like a fire suppression tap, clarification on the sewer tap fees if you're doing 3 taps, but they're serving multiple units, there's additional due for that, and a few other little details like that. So there are no streets or any public property really proposed to be with this development. You'll recall with larger subdivisions, sometimes, you know, streets are dedicated or parks or something like that, but this is pretty darn small. We did discuss during the last sketch plan and the informal discussion the option of loading the garages from creating an alley and loading them from the rear instead of loading all of them from Charles, just because of how that street front would look. So that might be something you guys want to address now. Definitely good to address now than at sketch plan. But just wanted to remind you guys that we had talked about that quite a bit. But the applicant did share that he had looked at a number of options to do that, and it wasn't working. And I can't remember all the details on why, but it was hard to sort out. Parking is adequate. I know that always comes up. And actually, per our new code, only 1 space is required per unit, but the applicant is providing 2 spaces. 1 would be in a garage, and then 1 would be in the driveway. And then with the layout and the way the driveways are, on-street parking on Charles is going to be almost non-existent, but there will be a couple spaces around the corner on North Cora. So let's see, what else is important to talk about here. This project will also require sidewalk and curb and gutter along those streets. Our town engineer did a design for that as part of the ramp project, but it never, we didn't end up building that as part of the ramp project. So we have shared that. So hopefully there's some efficiencies there in that being somewhat designed already. And hi, Thomas. I just saw that you're in here. For the record, Thomas has arrived.
I had a real hard time logging on. Sorry, here I am.
Glad you're here.
Yeah,
Yep, glad you're here. Let's see, so single family residential uses, there's a Voyager to the west, there's commercial uses to the south, kind of catty corner on the alley will be the space to create building. And then there's residential, there's residential to the west and the north, commercials to the south. I think I said that wrong. And then there's a couple other just additional considerations. So we had talked about affordable housing restrictions at the last sketch plan and said, how can we figure out how to do some sort of a 10%? Well, with the updates to our code, the applicant is not asking for as much as they were before, if that makes sense. So we've kind of expanded our uses and densities allowed in our zoning code and what's allowed by right. And now what the applicant is trying to do is really, they need a conditional use for it and a few variances for dimensional standards, but that's just because the units are attached. It's pretty darn close. So I'm kind of feeling like that might not be an appropriate request anymore, but would love to hear from you guys. And if you've had any other ideas on how we could do that. I know we were having a hard time figuring out, with 10% of 6 units and how is that going to work and what kind of deed restriction could we do? Maybe we do something really light, just like one of the units has to be employed in the county or something like that. So would love to get that sorted tonight. And then also the single family home design standards were recently amended and they are now called the residential design standards. So this is a big change from before. Before that, section 6.6 only applied to people who are building a single family home. Now that applies to all residential development. So the applicant will really want to be aware of that and what that means and ensure that they can comply with that. Those are standards. They are not, most of them in there are required. They're not just guidelines. And let's see, we also talked about short-term rentals during the last sketch plan hearing, and I think this is something we should discuss again. If the commission wants to see any restrictions and what that may look like, that would be good to just get sorted so the applicant can know what to expect there. But overall, I think even this was approved the last time with some considerations to be had. But with the updates to our code and our zoning code, this is even more in line with that code. It's really in line with our master plan. It's an infill project right in town where services, utilities, all that's available. It seems like generally a good project for the town. So happy to answer questions or go into more detail where helpful. Just let me know.
Thank you, Shay.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, would you
Yes.
like to add anything?
I think she's got it pretty well covered. Like she said, we're kind of just revisiting the exact same thing we did before. So under new guidelines, I think she kind of explained the differences, but that's really it. Nothing else has changed on my end.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing, so at this point, I'm going to open it up for public comment. Please state your name and address when you're called upon. Anybody?
If you don't know how to raise your hand to be called upon, you could try just unmuting yourself and that might work. Tom?
Kenny.
Go ahead, Tom.
I wrote a letter to Shay regarding this. This is a little, this is kind of a funny point, I thought, at which to have a public hearing. I'd like to hear more about the project before I make comment, but if this is one of the only times I'm going to be able to talk about it this evening, I think it's a great project. I think that it is really in keeping with the new master plan about affordable housing, our marketplace affordable housing that we just put into place. I'm interested in seeing exactly how that's going to work. I made one comment in this letter, and that was that I thought it would be nice if the front elevation could have different types of exposures for the buildings, like different siding or trim or color, something to keep it from looking like one block thing. I would, and this has nothing to do with the fact that it's a sixplex. I wouldn't want 6 houses across the street from that were identical in color, shape, size, and everything else. That's one of my suggestions. Thank you. But I think but all in all, I think this is what the town is looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody else?
Raymond?
Hello?
Yep.
Yes, I'm kind of the opposite opinion of Tom on this project.
Raymond? Raymond,
Yes,
can you introduce yourself and give us your address, please?
Sure. I live at 611 Charles Street. I'm Raymond Ferguson, lived in town 5.5 years, work at the school. I think it's a little too much concentration for a project we're going from a lot that holds 2 people currently to one that can potentially hold 26 and all their attendant cars and accoutrements. There's 2 parking spaces, but as we know, most people in Ridgway, everybody in town has a car. So most of them get parked. So I'm guessing there'd be more than 2 cars at many of those places, and there will be no place in front of them to park other than in front of my house. So basically there'd be no parking on Charles anymore, and I'll have a constant line of cars parked in front of my house. Not thrilled about that, but progress may be costing that. But I think we're setting 2 dangerous precedents here by putting 6 driveways in a half block, that close to a corner, that close to an educational facility. And the ice and snow load during the winter will be severe. A 35-foot building casts almost a 70-foot shadow in the middle of winter. And that's going to create, as we know in many other places, perma-ice. So the other precedent is subdividing 1 lot into 6 less than normal size lots, it seems. Maybe that's been done before, but I haven't seen it. And I don't see how it addresses affordable housing. I can't see how these can sell for anything less than $500,000. And I don't know too many working families in Ridgway that have the income to afford that. Also, I think he's going to help with the runoff situation, but it's also adding to the runoff situation. We're taking a perfectly permeable lot and making it impermeable for the majority of it. So there's just a lot of things about it that I'm not thrilled about. I'm sure there's changes that could be made, and there's plenty of approaches that people might come up with. I like Tom's suggestion of at least changing the appearance of the various units and giving it some character, which is a little plain from the drawings. But that's about my major complaints, so that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Krista,
Yeah, hi, everybody. Thank you. I just want to,
again, identify yourself and your address.
sorry, Krista Stewart, 641 Charles.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to acknowledge Ray's comments. I'm in agreement with a lot of his points there. I think 6 units is a little excessive for that size of that part of the whole lot there if it gets divided that way. I think 4 would be much more reasonable. I'm also concerned with the number of driveways and cars just in that short distance. And the ice and snow is definitely going to be a problem, because it already is. To a certain degree, I think it'll just make it worse. But I also wonder about the guidelines for driveways, because I notice in some other developments where driveways are put in, but the setback of the home is not back far enough that when the vehicle parks in the driveway, the vehicle actually covers the sidewalk access. And I'm worried that this might potentially have 6 driveways that do that same thing. So any pedestrians that want to utilize that sidewalk would then have an issue getting access there. And I'm just concerned about the possibility of the number of cars and excess traffic, especially with the Voyager. And there's just such an increase of traffic already coming up and back and forth on North Cora, as well as Charles up to the elementary school. So this is going to have a pretty significant impact, especially when you think about the traffic and cars that will be circulating around the block when the space to create facility gets built as well. So just some considerations to think of the impact of cars, parking, traffic, safety. And I guess that's it. And I have also previously written a letter to Shay as well, so that's on record with her.
Thank you, Krista.
Krista, that was from the last hearing, correct? Not something you've sent recently?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, but the points would be just as valid. Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I'm closing public comment. Shay, a question. Recently, we had a review where the applicant decided to not do separate lots, and the idea was, I guess, they're going to condominiumize the project, so there wouldn't be separate lots. Could this be done on this property? So you wouldn't have.
Correct. Like right now, the applicant could not build 6 units on that lot. They could build 4, but there's a little bit of a funky thing, Doug. So because the property is 1/4 block right now, it still needs to be divided north and south. So it has to be subdivided at least once to create that lot on the north for the townhouses and the lot on the south for the existing unit. But at that point, the lot on the north with the 6 townhouse units could be condominiumized instead of separate lots. And the applicant may prefer that. My understanding was that they were actually subdividing into separate lots. So I may actually have that wrong. And I think either way, there's still an option to do either one here.
Okay, thank you.
Shay, the existing 5 lots on this quarter block run north-south now? Or do they run east-west?
Let me look. I think they run north-south. Is that right, Matt? Is that what you have?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so a little harder to subdivide it. Is that what you were thinking, John, that if you could use historic lot lines, you wouldn't even need to subdivide it?
Yeah, potentially. And I mean, under our recently updated zoning code, each of those 5 lots could have a single family home on them now, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So I just, in response to Ray and Krista, I mean, this is another classic example of living in a town like Ridgway where various parcels around town have been undeveloped for decades and decades, and all of a sudden somebody comes in and wants to develop them. Things change pretty drastically overnight, but it's all, you know, within the realm of what was foreseeable even years ago. So, you know, while I empathize with the comments made and you know, everybody has to deal with ice and snow buildup. Parking is going to be something that has to be addressed. But you know, the fact is, even without this PUD, Matt could put 5 new homes in there. Well, maybe because he's got the existing home, he probably couldn't do it exactly 5 homes right now. But there certainly is an allowable increase in density way beyond what's there now. And that's hard to take. I understand when you're used to looking across the street at an almost undeveloped lot. But I do believe that this is definitely within the realm of what our master plan has been visualizing for years and what we really need. I mean, the only way to make market-driven affordable housing is to be making small units on small lots, because land cost is the biggest cost right now. Building cost is second, and so smaller structures on smaller lots. I highly doubt Raymond's estimate that these are going to be $500,000 units, common wall like this. But and that brings us to the discussion of somehow negotiating maybe one deed restricted unit. Shay had mentioned maybe having a simple requirement that the owner / renter, I suppose, would work in Uray County. I guess I'm more concerned that they are full-time residents than about where they work, because as I always like to point out, our mayor pro tem has lived here for a couple decades and he works in Telluride, and that doesn't make him a lesser involved member of our community. So having to find a job in Uray County can be difficult sometimes, especially current environment. So, but I am in favor of trying to figure out whether we could get at least one deed restricted unit in the process. And I guess I'm just from my personal opinion standpoint, I'm open to trying to have a discussion about facades and creating some unique siding variations that would make it look less like identical 6 units. That's my 25 cents.
Shay, I do not have the single family home design standards in front of me, but does that not in fact deal with some fenestration and massing, etc., that would apply here anyway?
Yeah, so, sorry, Bill.
Yeah.
Were you good? Yes, and that's reminding me, this is all still new to us, but there is a regulation in the new residential design standards that are in effect and would apply here that say no to detached single-family dwellings, duplex dwellings, townhomes, triplex dwelling structures, fourplex dwelling structures of substantially similar elevations shall be located adjacent to each other. So if that was something that couldn't be met, a deviation to that would need to be approved as part of this PUD.
So I think the fenestration issue and the possibly staggering, etc., could certainly mitigate that or speak to that. requirement or standard, suggested standard. So, cool, thanks. Thank you.
Good evening. I want to chime in with a question here for Shay real quick. Right now, as it stands, is this entire lot, it's one single lot right now, correct? Or is there,
No, it's 5 lots.
It's 5 historic lots, but they're under the same ownership. So it's just kind of considered one, large lot.
okay, I'm sorry. So, but those 5 lots are not represented on this drawing, right?
Correct.
Or,
Correct.
is that correct?
Yeah.
And are those 5 lots generally oriented in a north-south direction then?
That's what we discussed earlier. Yeah, no, with these blocks through the middle of town where the alleys cut the block
Yeah.
both ways,
Yeah.
there are 5 lots per quarter block, and the 2 on either end are something like 33 1/3 foot wide, and the 3 in the middle are each 25 foot wide.
Okay, so as it stands right now, it is drawn as 5 north-south oriented lots.
Correct.
And part of the application here is to change that to have this one horizontal lot on the south and the 6 individual lots on the north, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well, so with that, I'm going to throw out just a few of my comments here for the moment. I think some of the neighbors brought up some very valid points that I think we really need to make sure we address. Number one, I think the icing issue, I'm really concerned about that because I see that happening a lot. The second one is the curb cuts and the driveways. I do think that's going to be a little busy. But that was one comment. In general, I feel that some of those comments I think are worthy. As well as Tom's regarding the repetitive rhythm of the same materials and so forth. If it's possible, I don't know, but I liked what I heard about the notion, if I'm correct, that this could be achieved, the same scenario could be achieved where the northern section here would be actually one lot and condominiumized, so that you could have several separate units that you could sell, but it was all on one lot. Is that what I'm understanding as a possibility?
Shay, you're muted.
Thank you. That is a possibility. It'd probably be good to hear from Matt what his preference is on that. I've heard mixed reviews. It used to be that getting financing for condos was really hard. And I've heard a recent update that actually getting financing for townhouses is harder than getting financing for condos. So sometimes just the ability to get financing is what drives how people want to divide their property.
Okay. Well, without knowing a lot of the numbers and things that Matt has worked out probably for a long time here, it seems to me that that wouldn't be necessarily a bad direction if it's feasible, where this was all, instead of having to deal with all these small divided lots, that it's one lot, but you can still sell off individual units. So that was one thing I don't know if it's possible, but I'd like to encourage that. The other thing I would like to encourage, but I'm sure it comes down to, a numbers game, which I'm sure Matt has been crunching for a long time also. But gosh, it sure seems like if we could get rid of one unit on there and have it to be 5 units rather than 6, then certainly that gives some more latitude for shifting and moving and a variety of things that could happen. But I'm assuming that there's 6 there because that's what's going to make the numbers work. If I understand correctly, if there's a possibility for one or a few of these to actually be set up as short-term, I would love to discourage that. I think the whole idea of this kind of density in town is what we want to do. I'm all in favor of that. But I certainly would be a little disappointed if we were to provide all this, that some of that could be used as short-term. I think it's obviously more appropriate to be long-term. And then I had a thought to throw out there, and I'm pretty sure that there's a reason why it's not that way, but I'm going to just throw it out there. The two northeast units, so the ones that are too closest to the corner, which I do think with the traffic and view corridors and all of that, that's going to be a little messy. I don't know if it would be possible geometrically here. I think the dimensions are going to not really work, but boy, if those two turned and faced towards Cora, then we would get rid of 2 elevations on Charles instead of 6 that are all the same. And then you would lessen some of the curb cuts right at the corner and the driveways. And then you would also now start putting more of that load onto Cora Street rather than 6 units loading on the Charles. But I'm thinking that there's no way you can actually fit that, but it's optimistic. But once again, that's a reason why if you were to get rid of one of those units, you could try that, but I'm sure that numbers won't work on that. And then I just want to make sure that everyone's aware, if I'm not mistaken too, that according to this proposal here with the sketch plan that I'm seeing, the south horizontal lot that has the existing apartment and garage, that still, you know, will be allowed to have a single family residence in front of that. And if I'm not mistaken, and if that's the case, then, you know, obviously that's an additional amount of density that we don't see right now on this drawing. And then, yeah, and then I mentioned the curb cuts. So those are my quick top of my head issues and thoughts. And I want to encourage this project. I like it. I really want it to happen, but I do think that it is somewhat problematic, and you know, because it's a numbers crunching thing, and we're trying to maximize. So I get it, but I think it's bringing up some issues. So hopefully we can resolve those. Thank you.
Shay, could you clarify something that Thomas just brought up?
Mhm.
Is the existing residence that's on there, is that an ADU compliant structure?
Yeah, it's a good question, Doug. So we don't call it an ADU unless it can be accessory to something. So technically what is on that lot right now is a single family dwelling unit. It eventually, I believe, was built so that it could be converted into an ADU once a single family house is built.
Okay.
So a little bit of semantics, but I'm getting
No,
the from Thomas.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to jump in because that was my understanding. So, you know, Nick Wasser's father owned that, and they built it with that intention originally, which was, yeah, exactly like you said, this is an ADU for now. Maybe we never build a house in front, but it's set up so that you could. And I just want everyone to be aware of that in itself could be a large amount of density in addition to all of these units there. And again, I'm in favor of this, but gosh, if we could get rid of one unit, the amount of breathing room that would allow would certainly be more comfortable. But again, I understand that that's not always reasonable.
And I might add one clarification there too. With our recent code updates, you could fit a lot more than one more single family house on that property. I'm not sure how it would exactly work, being that unit is kind of set up as an ADU. Like you can't have an ADU to a duplex, but you could potentially add on to that same existing unit and probably with our new code get a lot more units on that property.
That's because I'm sorry, is it in commercial zone?
Historic residential, the whole block is historic.
Right, so it has more density allowed than yeah, okay, yeah, so even more so. We just need to be aware of what is the maximum potential for that giant quarter of that block.
Mhm.
There's a lot going on there, but of course we want to encourage that density, so it's not a bad thing. It just has to be done well, hopefully.
Shay, just to expand on this subject, the maximum buildability of that property.
Mhm.
If the existing structure wasn't there, could each of the historic lots have a residence and an ADU?
So if that quarter block would, like, nothing was built on it and there are 5 historic lots there, technically per the new updated zoning regs, each historic lot could have a single family home with an ADU or a duplex on it. So there could be easily 10 units on that quarter block by right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Right, and I think to that point, what we're talking about here is a slightly reallocated plan for 9. So yes, it's north loaded. And so that's kind of the question for me. And like, I think, you know, for me, it feels like rear loading. I know, I can't remember why this was a problem for the applicant, but I do feel like rear loading changes a lot of things for me, both in terms of the kind of the way the street feels. I just went to Buena Vista and was hanging out in the South Main development, and rear loading has done a lot for that development in terms of how it vibes. And I do think it's worth revisiting that conversation. I appreciate the fact that having an alley kind of cut through the middle of that lot creates the potential for some complexity, but it also seems like it's a real opportunity here because there's a true alley going north-south as well as Cora, so you could kind of bridge the two. So yeah, I would love to hear from the applicant about why the rear load, south load thing isn't working. I know we talked about it last time.
Okay, let's direct this to Matt then. Matt, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, sure. We've pretty much tried just to address all the layout questions. I've drawn this to this level probably 10 times. And in doing so, I'm working the best scenario for every unit. Not to favor the end units, not to favor the middle units, not to have these two show home units that face Cora while the other ones sit in their backyard adjacent to Charles Street. The rear loading thing was a goal, and I tried to make it work in a couple different scenarios. Most people in Ridgway and surrounding areas have toys. They have large trucks. You could not back a truck into a driveway, into your garage, if it was rear loading. The public street is plenty wide. We're going to put in plenty of room for a car to be in that space without touching the sidewalk. We have done this layout multiple times to ensure that that second car spot is on their property. And then, yes, you do have room to back a trailer into your own garage. You're not limited by having a breezeway in the back. And we also plan to use that back area to address a pretty major drainage issue coming down the alleyway with a natural scree field coming through there to bring water out to our new culvert on Cora Street and then evacuating that out. So I have played around with just about every layout design I can. And this one seems to work best with our alleyways and not having to use the alley on, I don't know if anyone drives it, but the alley that exits into Charles Street is extremely tight. And if you were to make that someone's entrance on that side, there is a house that uses that alley as their front. So you wouldn't be able to turn, I don't know if you'd be able to swing a regular SUV in if that was the driveway. So it would create some pretty major issues at that juncture, to speak of snow and ice, which we need to address as well. So we've tried it, and I think that aesthetically, I do plan to use at least 6 different materials on the front, sides, and backs. You will not have the back of this building looking bland. So aesthetically, it gives me the best design standpoint architecturally to make something really cool at the front of this building, that when people drive down Charles Street, they notice it. And it is like something that people in Ridgway are driving through Ridgway say, wow, that's a really cool multifamily development. And addressing real quick the shade and the visual corner there. The trees now are about, I don't know, I think 13 feet taller than the buildings will be. they do not cast a 70-foot shadow, or the neighbors wouldn't have to park on this side of the street to get shade. They would have shade all the way across the street. So I don't know where that data came from, but they will be shorter than what's there now. And they will also be further in than the visual on the corner. So when you come to that stop sign, the right of way and setback will actually push the buildings further back than the tree space that's there now. So I know it's really hard to picture it all, and until we get a little further here, we will have a lot better renderings for you guys to get a visual of this kind of stuff, but everything costs money, and we're working to get to that point. But just to address the design thing, I fully intend to use lots of mixed materials, lots of dimension, and the two end units will show that too with the windows. And so
Matt, I have a question that's somewhat related here. If I'm remembering correctly, the lowest point on the lot is the northeast corner. Is that correct? It's at the stop sign, essentially.
correct.
Have you, if you're going to have the 6 curb cuts and entries on the north side of the structure, have you given serious thought as to how steep those driveways are going to have to be, or the entry sidewalks, since they're going to be in that north shadow? That it's a fair amount of snow shoveling that will need to be done to clear those, and I'm just wondering where that snow is going to go, or have you, I mean, in other words, I know you found it very difficult to enter the garages, the parking areas in the back, but in the front, you will have to move, probably 4 or 5 times the amount of snow to clear each of those driveways. And I'm just wondering where that snow is going to go, or if you've thought about that.
Yeah, definitely. They'll appear to be fairly flat on entry. They don't go down. We only have a 2.1 foot drop over the back corner of this unit to the front corner. So visually, you're not going to have these steep driveways going down or up. They're going to appear to be fairly flat. Our new sidewalk will have a culvert under it with a grate drain, and the driveways are heated. So all the driveways will be melting off naturally into the culvert, and that will evac again at the corner of North Cora and North Charles, which I plan to work with the town engineer on how we're going to evac that into a larger culvert across the street.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Matt, what about the question of a deed restricted unit?
I'd love to explore it, and I think we went over this kind of during the informal and the last sketch plan, but we just need to come up with a structure that works for everyone. I think it's really hard to say, okay, I'm going to build these units and they're all for sale. I don't have pockets deep enough to say these are all rentals, So if I did, I would love to say, these are only rentable by Uray County residents. But it gets really tricky when you put a for sale sign on 6 units and then you tell the owner what they do with them. So I think we just kind of I'd have to know how that works, and how I get like how Lena Street with 19 townhomes can make that work, because I believe they're doing one of their buildings as a deed restricted, which clarifies things a lot more property wise. But when you only have 6 units, I guess for me, I'm all about how we can make something work like that. I just need to know exactly how we do it and how the bank looks at it and all that stuff. But I would love,
You're willing to explore it.
yeah, for sure.
And then are you willing to plat note them everything so that there's no short-term rentals?
I think that's another thing that gets really hard too, because if you have a local family that wants to downsize or something like that, and they want to live in town, move from Log Hill or something like that, and they do want to have a short-term permit, because you can have a short-term permit for 1 bedroom, and say they want to be able to rent one of their bedrooms, I really hate to take the freedom of them to get a permit away on a property that they just purchased brand new, to say you can't short-term rent your house. And that's another thing that maybe literature can go around, but I'm just not familiar. I've never had a short-term rental. I know there's one across the street from me. I don't know how the ins and outs it works with Ridgway, so maybe that's something that we could also dig deeper into the wording on anyway.
Okay. I'd be willing to explore an allowance for what you describe as the 1 bedroom sort of Airbnb model, but not the whole structure. I don't know, Shay, if that's something you've ever seen done. But I'd be more open to that than I just think the impact of short-term rentals, potentially every one of those being a short-term rental, is pretty impactful. But I'm empathetic with your idea about having to be able to rent out a room, maybe.
I would certainly agree with you, John. It just in terms of if we're not doing a deed restricted unit, I think really limiting to maybe 1 bedroom, etc., any of the short-term rental possibilities. I think that's a fair trade, so to speak. So.
And I was thinking along the same lines that I feel the same way, that I would not want these to be all short-term rentals, as they do bring a lot of toys and use up a lot of parking typically, and the noise and all that stuff with the residents around. I would feel comfortable doing a 1 unit as a short-term rental if that's something that we can do. Or the deed restriction, if we did do that, to have it be a local resident, as John said. So I agree with the short-term rental, just the 1 unit, if that's possible.
Jennifer, for clarification, are you saying just allow 1 unit to be a short-term rental, or just allow people who live there to rent 1 bedroom as a short-term rental?
Just the 1 unit to be the short-term rental.
1 out of the 6?
Yes.
Oh.
Is that different from what you were saying?
Yeah, what I was saying is what Matt was saying, which is allow the potential rental of a bedroom along the Airbnb model, but not the whole structure.
Is that
but for every sorry,
for all 6 units, you rent short-term 1 bedroom out of any of those 6 units?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was
saying as well.
So what might be helpful to understand here is the way our short-term rental regulations look is that in order to rent anything more than 1 bedroom in your house, you basically qualify as needing a license and counting towards the 50 total that we issue for our town. So that's our cap. But when you rent 1 bedroom, more like almost like the couch surfing model or something where it's just, a visitor comes in or a couple comes in, they share your kitchen and they're staying with you while you are there. That is a lot different. And the council during our short-term rental kind of policy discussions had said, that's a lot less impactful because the owner's there. Like Jennifer, if you and Jeff said, hey, we're happy to rent our room out, we'd like to meet new people and have visitors come in, and we have an extra bedroom, that feels a lot different than, renting out a big house where what you were saying, I think Jennifer, was like, 10 cars could show up and the bachelor party or whatever. It feels a lot different than like the single traveler or the couple coming to stay in your house with you.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the owner would have to be there, correct? Or the owner could be gone.
The owner could be gone. There's no specific restriction that the owner has to physically be there, but they do have to share their space. It is their primary, it is their home, and they are only allowed to be renting one bedroom in that. So there's a little
noted that they're not eligible for a permit, a short-term rental permit, and they could still do what Matt was describing without that.
You still need a license to do the one bedroom within your house, but it doesn't count towards those 50.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Well, that's good. Yeah. I was unaware of that.
Yeah, when we debated that, we decided the impact of a single bedroom was a whole lot less than renting out the whole structure. So we decided to not count that against. There was a lot of pushback that our cap was going to be a problem. We've never rented, we've never given out more than about 25 licenses, I believe. Is that right, Shay?
We're at 30 now. We got a handful in the last year that really bumped it up.
Okay. Well, anyway, we didn't have near the rush on them that some people thought we would. So we did allow for the single bedroom model to not count against the cap.
Cool. Very good.
Well, I'll just go ahead and add to what you guys said in agreement that, again, I think all of us want Matt to be able to do something with this property and to provide housing. And of course, I think we want to do everything we can to not limit his abilities, but also then try to encourage the type of people and tenants that are there to be in the realm of the model that we want. And in the spirit of trying to work something out, I think that I would agree with everyone that I would not approve these being fully used for short-term rental, but certainly based on his request to maybe allow it to have a bedroom, and based on what Shay just said, I would go ahead and agree with that. I think that's a reasonable scenario.
So that's great. I feel like we have pretty good consensus on the short-term rental item and topic. Is there any more on that short-term stuff?
Excuse me.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. And then the deed restriction stuff, I think you were talking about that as well. And it sounds like Matt's open to exploring that. Is that something you want staff to work on with him to kind of come up with a proposal for the preliminary plat submittal for you guys to review? Or do you have anything else you want to share or have concerns about for that topic?
No, I think you're hearing that there's consensus to explore the possibility of coming up with a relatively simple structure to have legal structure to have one unit be deed restricted to a local.
Okay.
A local resident. Yeah.
Well, and the tricky with that is that, I guess, so we're saying that it has to be somebody that already lives here and rents or what, as opposed to being, I'm no expert on deed restrictions, so I'm not sure how we do this.
Me either, John. It's super complicated. So I think one of the most common things, like a friend of mine is the Routt County or Greater Routt County Steamboat Springs area housing authority director, and I talked to him a while ago when trying to sort some of this out, and he was saying, you know, in this area, all they do is restrict it that you have to be employed here, because that really means you are a local. By saying it has to be your primary residence, it doesn't mean that you can't have a secondary residence in Telluride or Montrose. So it gets a little sticky, but I think I'm happy to really explore that and see what all the different options are and try to bring a proposal to you guys that maybe Matt and I can agree upon, or at least try to, you know, narrow in something that we think you guys might appreciate, and then we can get the details of that worked out at preliminary plat of exactly, you know, what a note would say, and I can try to help Matt understand kind of how that works and stuff too. I know he threw out some questions on, you know, what that looks like and how it works.
That makes sense to me. And you know, if it ends up for simplicity's sake that it has to be that they're employed in the county, that's not a deal breaker to me.
Okay, but I totally do get what you're saying. I mean, it's not that all of our, you know, local residents who participate and give back to our community work here. That's not always the case, but it might be the most straightforward way to do it, and a way to get our, you know, teachers, government employees, nonprofit employees, that kind of group.
No, that makes sense.
Here. So we'll look at some options.
A de facto employment cap.
Go ahead, Tess. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, like, if you require that people be employed within county, like, then that property will always be tied to what is the income that is available in the county.
True.
That's a good point.
I think also in Telluride, part of the requirement is not only that you show, oh, I'm sorry. Deb, you want to go ahead?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. I believe up in Telluride, part of the requirement is not only that you have, that you show employment from there, but that you show that it's longer than, I think, a 6-month situation. Because now the other problem is that we have a lot of seasonal work. So someone could say, well, here I've got employment, I'm a lifty up in Telluride, you know, for several months out of the year. The rest of the time I'm working in Montrose or something, or, you know, so I think that's another complicated part too. But I do think I would like to also voice approval that I think it would be great if we could encourage Matt to make a deed restricted unit work here. And it does sound like he's open to it, which I think we're grateful for. But I think it also sounds like there needs to just be, like Shay said, it's a little bit of education and communication, looking back and forth at all the restrictions. But I think it could work. And personally, I would say, as long as there's a deed restricted unit and someone shows some degree of residence here locally, I think we could keep it pretty loose and still achieve what we're trying to do without making it too complicated, hopefully. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention that the population of Ridgway is growing, and that means people are moving here. And I think if we tied the residential requirement, the resident requirement, to occupying the unit within so many days of closing, because I moved from the Front Range to come over here, and I bought a house, but it, you know, selling the other house and doing the moving, legally, when I bought the house, I wasn't a resident here. And I think there's a lot of people that are living here now that went through that same situation.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, but I also think that our main goal here needs to be that we keep it simple. And when you think about, for instance, a teacher who's been working in the area for however many years and came as a young person, maybe had their first job here, and now they're ready to decide that they want to stay here and they want to buy a home. That's the kind of person that I see us targeting this kind of thing for. So, but I think we should leave it to staff and the applicant to pick out.
Sure.
Great.
Not to cut you off, Bill.
Well, no, I just, what my mind goes to at the moment is some of the fallout from COVID issues and lack of tax revenues, and the possibility of having to lay off at either teachers or public servants in the county, what sort of provision would that bring up, or what sort of situation would that bring up? If one buys a house deed restricted, you're a teacher, and then you get laid off, you are no longer in compliance, but you own the house. What?
There's got to be provisions for that. This has got to happen.
Yeah, so typically, Bill, it says that at time of purchase, you meet these qualifications, and it's just impossible, assuming that that person meets like income restrictions or job location restrictions. You know, you hope that the next job they get kind of still meets those, but you're right. I mean, someone could be a teacher here, get laid off, or just want to change jobs and decide to be a teacher in San Miguel County somewhere.
Right.
And it's just kind of inherently how it works. And you guys are definitely getting on the complications with deed restrictions. There's nothing that is perfect. These are really, really hard to do, and you just do the best you can, and you hope that the majority of the units that we deed restrict as a town serve a really good purpose, and that few of them are kind of taken advantage of, or, you know, have someone like have it as their fifth home and they're just making money off of it somehow.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
They're in perpetuity, so the resale value is very much tied to the restriction. So even if someone gets laid off as a teacher and they start working as a software developer, it's not like they can sell that house for $1 million just because the market is driving it. There's still, the deed restriction is located to the land. Like, it makes that home affordable effectively in perpetuity every time it changes hands. So I do think it's worth investigating.
So it sounds like we have some good direction on that, or I have some good direction on that. I think the other item that we've discussed in and out tonight that would be helpful to kind of wrap up is that the discussion of front loading these units and the number of driveways kind of crossing the sidewalk and on Cora or on Charles Street versus, you know, being alley loaded and such. I guess one question I have to just throw out there, and I feel like I might have asked last time, so sorry, it's been a year, so much has happened. What would the commission consider a variance to front setback to allow those buildings to get a little closer to the street, to allow more space in the back for an alley and for that access? And is that something that, you know, I don't know if that would be helpful to the neighbors or not, or if that is something the applicant would like or not, but just throwing out an idea to discuss.
Can I chime in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I pushed the buildings all the way, like with that in consideration, without even asking. I pushed them very far up to the front, to the point where I thought it would be aesthetically very unpleasing to be walking down the sidewalk and have this wall next to you. And it still makes it extremely tight on the garage end. On plans, it looks pretty good, but it's still super tight coming off of the alley. So basically what you'll do then is you'll close it off where everyone's hates coming in on the alley. We hate coming in on the alley, so we come in on Charles. And so then you basically funnel it down to one place where these people are coming in and out. And you're just asking for more issues in the long run there, as far as drainage and all sorts of things. So even if I pushed it, let's just say I pushed it to the sidewalk, because I did put it there in CAD, you still can't fit, this is an extreme example, but you can't fit a crew cab long bed between the building and the property line of where the pavement would be. So it doesn't work. And I really, really want to focus on the aesthetics of this thing. And I think it just, even if there was a way to make it work aesthetically, I really, really think after it was built, it would be an eyesore to have a bunch of people driving in from one entrance because they didn't want to go in on the alley. You're going to have a bit of a little traffic jam there because now you can come in from four corners and go around if somebody's on one corner. And believe it or not, Cora is a pretty busy street. People are flying up and down Cora all day long, and Voyager does see a fair amount of traffic stopping, standing all day long. So if we put an entrance right there, I know the alley would still be an entrance, but I just have a real good feeling that the alley would kind of be the non-used one. We're putting a lot of impact in the middle of the street there, and Raymond, like Raymond said, there's kids over there, and I want to take all that into consideration. And in laying this out, I have tried a lot of different things that were all brought up kind of informal and in the last sketch plan, and even in between with the COVID stuff, I started to play around again, and this is just the best layout I can nail down with the space we have. So,
well, your point on being around the corner from Voyager is well taken. It's a good point to keep as far away as possible from having people.
I guess where I get stuck, I mean, I agree that I think the layout with the driveways going to Charles it looks like the best way to do it. What I'm concerned about, again, I didn't get to put my 2 cents in on it, was the drainage. I live in a condo that faces the north side. And so it looks like the kind of the same setup, and we get ice all over our driveways, all over the entrances to our to come into our house. So you did say that the driveways were heated, but do you have going to the doorways and the entranceways and people going in and out? Do you have steps, or are those heated as well? How is the drainage coming out that it won't go to the doorway? Matt, can you elaborate on that?
yes. So basically the way the front system works is the radiant heat is ran throughout. So you'll have anywhere there's concrete will be warm. So your entryway underneath what you see as kind of the deck there, also, and all the way into the slab in the garage. So what happens is you have a grate somewhere in the middle of what you see as the driveway. That takes the majority of all the moisture and evacs it to the corner. And then what you'll have in the roof eaves is heated wire bringing what would have been ice as water down your drain pipe also into that culvert underground. This is something that you see in Crested Butte and Aspen, and places that get way more snow than us every year have been utilizing for years and years and years. So it's pretty proven. It works well. It's actually, for the homeowner, it's very affordable because you're not heating these things to like what you would heat your house to. It's a very minimal temperature to keep snow from sticking, basically, and it works. It's pretty proven. And when we do get a 4-foot dump, which happens, then as soon as you shovel it off, it's not ice underneath because you have a layer of water, basically.
Now that you clarified, Matt, from a little earlier too, regarding the snow melt, and you just elaborated that too, and I'm convinced it is a good system and it does work. I think that will definitely address a lot of our concerns that on the north side, and clearly I'm sure you're aware that if you didn't provide the snow melt, then we would be looking at a much more serious problem. But that said, I'm sure, like you said, that you've tried a gazillion different diagrams here to see if this would work. And I am in agreement with you that, Jim, you just don't have the dimensional geometry for you to be able to swing a vehicle with the radiuses you need and the size of vehicles to do that backloading, although it would be great. But I was just wondering now if there was an alternative opportunity where maybe you took, originally I was thinking of the two east units, but now with the talk about Voyager, I don't know if I like that. But what if, and understanding that the north-south alley on the west is pretty tight, what if you were to take maybe the last two units and just have them have that access, turn them around in some way so that because they're really close to the alley, you're not having to deal with them going east-west and then having to do another radius into the driveway. But I'm wondering if that, or even just one of those units, like one end unit, could be turned in a way where it was backloaded. And in other words, you wouldn't even have an alley going all the way across the whole from east to west. It might only be a partial alley just to service two units rather than, and then you would break up your front elevation too with those units being slightly differentiated. I don't know. It's just a thought.
I think the problem is you're still fighting the slope of this property because you need to have the driveways, no matter where they're coming from, drain away from the residents.
Right, positive.
So already sloping from south to north. Then if you try and put an alley out there, then he's got to build up the units to get some slope away from the unit. And it's going to eat up space.
I'm not convinced, but I know I'm
Where
throwing out there.
I'm sorry if I'm-
There's swales and grates and drains you could do if you needed to. But I understand what you're saying, and I think it's valid. And I think what I'm asking for is probably not realistic anyway. But I'm just trying to see if we can find a solution.
Can I ask, where are we talking about putting an alley on the existing, on his property? Are we talking about putting an alley on the south side of the units?
Well, what I think, if I understand correctly, John, the idea was that if we were to have a backloaded scenario, you would have an east-west alley going from the alley to Cora. And, so you could service a lot of that, for those from the backside. But the problem is that the radius is that he doesn't have enough width. And he said, even if I push all of these way far north, I still don't have the space to make the radius of a turn for a car. And
Yeah,
that's
that
why I'm
doesn't,
saying,
that
well, what about
doesn't
just an
make
end
sense.
unit? Then you don't have to deal with getting it into the middle of the lot and then turning it. You have a little less. It's minor.
Yeah.
I don't see it.
Okay. No biggie.
It brings me back to a question I wanted to ask Matt, though. Matt, earlier we were talking about the whatever the lot would be called that upon which your existing home sits with the driveway. What can I ask what your plans are for that? Are you foreseeing adding another structure or two there? What's your thought?
I have no plans at this time. Right now, just focusing on the townhomes. So there's no projected project going on the other side of the lot.
Okay. It's actually one of my thoughts was the opposite of what Shay started this current discussion with, which was to move everything further south and cut off some of your saved lot so that these 6 new townhomes can be further away from the street, causing less shading onto the street and these issues where there isn't heated concrete. Because I was thinking for a while now about your comment earlier about the trees being taller than the structures and not casting shadows as long as what Raven said initially. And I think that's because of the difference between the sun angle in the winter and the summer, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. So in the winter, when the sun's so much lower in the sky, your structures are going to cast a much longer shadow than the trees cast in the summer, unless I'm misunderstanding what your thinking was. So my point being, maybe look at moving everything a little bit further to the south, cutting off a small sliver of, or somewhat of a sliver of your reserved lot, so that everything can be a little bit further than from the street, causing less snow and ice issue actually on Charles. Just a thought.
John, do we know what the setback, what that would do setback wise relative to the structure that is on the property at the moment? Because as I recall, it's close to the middle. There it is. Well, yeah. So there is some room.
There's plenty of room there.
Yeah, there's, yeah.
If you look at the setback line that's drawn in red that shows the 8-foot setback at the corner, and that's all he has to maintain is 8 feet. It looks to me like that's probably 16 feet from his north wall to the new property line of the townhomes.
Yeah.
Actually, right on the map, it says 18 feet.
Okay, can't quite. Yeah. Okay.
Oh.
Thank.
There we go.
Thank you, Shay.
So, I mean, just another thought of just trying to minimize the impact that some of the neighbors are feeling or would be negatively impacting Charles across from their homes.
Yeah, I can look into that too. I can play with the actual sun path and get a good idea of what that's going to do.
Okay.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, though. The fact that all of that is snowmelt, I think resolves a lot of our concerns, even if you were to move that stuff further south. I mean, what it would help, obviously, is the angle of the shadow and how far it goes out in the street. But if he's providing and his costs allow for him to, do snowmelt in the sidewalk or the walkway up to the house and the driveway and the garage, then I would agree with him quite strongly that the ice issue wouldn't be there. Now, how much water that generates and goes into the corner, I don't think it would be that much, but that would be another concern. But I don't know if moving them south is going to help the ice part as much. And
yeah, I don't know either. My concern, though, is that the plowing of Charles, typically plowing to the edge of the right of way, and that being in shadow, that's where we're going to be creating some pretty serious snow dams, some berms of snow whenever there's a big enough storm that they have to plow. And that's an
point.
That's an issue everywhere in town, obviously, but if it's shaded by the buildings, it makes for some issues.
That's a good point, because that won't be snow melted. So
Right.
The damming effect is definitely something to consider. I would agree with that.
Right.
All right.
Let me
So
just,
Shay, oh,
I just want to clarify, does anybody on the commission have an issue with any of the variances that are included in this application?
I would have to make sure I know which every one of those are.
It's on page 3 of the staff report.
All right, stand by.
so I guess I had a question for Shay. So if we allow the first variance, we're talking about allowing more than 4 units on the plot, does that, how do I ask this? Right now it stands as 7 units that we're approving. If we approve the 7 units, does that mean they could not put another unit where that house is?
Oh, that's a great question. So I don't think so. Let me think through this out loud. I believe what we're doing with this is we're splitting the lot into 2, north and south. And what the request is, and I don't know that I explained this that well in the staff report, is that the north lot would allow for up to 4 townhouse units on it. The request is to put 6. So it's not like setting a maximum number of units for the whole development. it's just allowing, the conditional use would just be allowing 6 on that northern lot that would, you know, be subdivided into those 6 separate lots. Does that answer your question, Jennifer?
Yes.
Okay. And all of these are really finally approved with the preliminary plat approval. So a good thing to raise any concerns you have now, so Matt doesn't get too far down the road and we say, wait, that, you know, those criteria can't be met. Or, you know, we don't feel that that can, you know, that can work. Just as a reminder, I think the fact that almost all of them are wouldn't apply if he did a condo plat, but do apply for creating single units is an interesting thing to consider. Just because, you know, no matter what, visually it would kind of look the same, but it would be allowed with a condo plat, but is needing a variance for doing this other type of development. And I feel like we have that conversation a lot. Is like, well, it'd be allowed in a different way. So how do we not allow it in this with this route with just different ownership style? So just something to consider.
I think that's, sorry, I think that's definitely an interesting situation, and I don't know, you know, it seems to me like it's up to Matt to decide how he wants to present that. But it sure seems to me, as I said earlier, just from whatever in my gut, that having this be one lot with anywhere from 4 to 6 units on it, and then still being able to sell them as individual units, but not as individual lots, sounds a lot simpler, smoother, easier, and so forth. Although it's possible the numbers don't work. But I think, like you said, Shay, I think what I'm worried about is that, you know, if we do this here, are we setting a precedent that more and more people can come and say, well, you know, Matt did it, now I want to squish a bunch more buildings into this lot, you know, and so forth. And then we're going to start ending up having different kind of densities than maybe we, you know, have if we keep letting more and more variances happen. So in some ways, we would still be allowing Matt to provide whatever 4 to 6 units if he could do that and still be able to sell them. But it wouldn't necessarily then bring on all these other little dangling participles here that
well, Thomas, Bill, it seems to me that, and this is something Shay mentioned, I think, in her analysis, is that we are talking about more density right near the center of town, and you know, and this speaks to that. I mean, this is as close at, you know, in HR as you can get to, you know, to the commercial center. I would not be looking at this nearly as favorably if it were, you know, 4 blocks to the west, you know, surrounded by single family homes and et cetera. But I think there's some argument to be made that the area immediately around the core, you know, that we should look at possible denser development there than further afield. So
okay, well, and just to be clear, I'm in agreement with you, Bill, and I'm okay with density where it is. That's not my issue. I'm just talking about the difference in, I mean, there's 7 ways to skin a cat or whatever. I mean, you can still have 6 units. They'll still be the same density. The project will look exactly the same, but you wouldn't have 6 individual lots. You would have 1 lot and they'd all be condominiumized. So that's what I'm just talking about. But what I am worried is that, yes, then the precedent could be set and then we get more and more of these maybe in other places, like you said, but that's down the road. Anyway.
Yeah. And
just more the simplicity factor. I just don't know. I think it's an interesting thing. I don't know what the right answer is. It's not up to me to decide, I think.
Yeah, maybe Matt could, you know, I'm sure I'm sure Matt has been digging for information in both those scenarios. But yeah.
I'm okay with the density, just to be clear. So yes, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, yeah.
So, Shay, on the differences between making it 6 separate lots, so that it's still considered a PUD, correct? Either way?
Yep.
Okay. So I believe the only difference being that, just to simplify it, the only difference is that in this process, we're saying yes to making it 6 separate lots, which sounds much different as skipping that and saying it's 6 condominiums on 1 lot. But for the most part, the entire thing is verbiage. But I don't understand the difference, I guess, in the process at this point, what the difference is in saying, okay, you know, like Thomas said, it's 1 big lot with 1 building on it and 6 units. Whether you want to call that 12-inch piece of wall, one side of the drywall is yours and the other side of the drywall is your neighbor's, and you want to call it a lot, at the end of the day, they're condos and they're units. So I guess I'm confused on what it does for the actual property compared to a condo as well.
My understanding in that was basically just what Shay said, is just only 2 things. One was it had to deal with financing and how that may or may not be encouraged, one of the 2. But the other one, correct me if I'm wrong, Shay, is that you were saying we wouldn't have to approve all these other variances then. And so that would simplify that process, and then we wouldn't have all these precedents set by these variances being approved. But that's my understanding. And again, it's not my decision, but I'm just trying to see if we can find a way to make it work.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Thomas. We wouldn't necessarily be like technically approving the variances, because we would count the lot width as the whole lot instead of each individual lot. But I get what you're saying, Matt. I mean, it visually and what's on the ground, it's going to look the same. So does it really matter? And I think what we've seen before is someone do one thing and then they switch to the other. So, you know, like someone built a duplex in Parkside that was on a duplex lot, and then they subdivided it. Well, we probably wouldn't have subdivided it before they built the duplex, but after they built it, it was like, well, it's changing nothing, so what does it matter? So I think I get what both of you are saying. I'm having a hard time feeling like I have a preference between either one, or see like real clarity for one or the other. So probably something I can think about a little bit and talk with Matt about. Maybe we can talk about, you know, just organization and shared responsibilities as well, because that's a little bit different when you have in a condo association. You generally have a little HOA and you deal with things perhaps slightly differently than like a townhouse association, or a townhouse would typically have like a party wall agreement, maybe some easements or maybe some maintenance agreements, but you don't typically set up a little HOA. So maybe we can talk through the options there and see what makes sense for, you know, long-term maintenance and longevity and all that stuff, since I feel like you guys are kind of saying, well, it's going to look the same on the ground either way. And I think we could likely justify that without setting too much of a precedent of approving all these variances and such.
Cool.
Doug, I don't think you got your question answered though, which is, how do we all feel about these variances? And that's kind of why I brought this up, is that there's several
well,
here.
you know, John raised the issue early on, saying that the key to make anything affordable, especially here, is you reduce lot sizes, and that's what we've done. So in essence, one of the ways to put a structure on something that's in a smaller lot is if we allow, for example, the 0 lot line. Now, that's fairly common and has been for many, many years across the country. That's one of the options. Now, this the fact that they're both 0 lot lines, the lot, or 0 setbacks, is because you got a property line there. And I've seen it done with an offset where one person gets one side yard, and then there's a solid wall from the neighbor on the other property line. But this is just a different way of doing a structure that gets essentially what could be on these properties. That was the point I made about, since we had 5 lots, we could have 5 residences and 5 ADUs. We'd have 10 units on this entire property. That would be the maximum build out under the current code. No variances required.
And that's less than what's proposed.
It's more.
Yeah.
That's way
What
I'm sorry, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's a lot more than what's proposed. Yeah. Well, Lena Commons is going to have 0 setbacks, side yard setbacks too. All those units are smooshed together too. So
Smooshed, that's an official term?
it's an architectonic term. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think given all these factors, I'll just say I am inclined to approve these variances. I think the condo versus subdivision conversation is ultimately a question of resale and risk exposure and planning investment that is basically up to the applicant. For purposes of like the public good and how people experience this building is kind of equal value. It sounds like it's harder to go the subdivision route, but there may be, I'm not really qualified, I'm not a real estate agent, but intuitively it sounds to me like buying the land is more valuable than buying a condo. But there are also costs and risks associated with that. But in terms of the level of density and the design, and we've talked through the snow issue and the loading issue and kind of where it is vis-a-vis kids, where it is vis-a-vis traffic, like I feel comfortable reapproving this plan on second view / first view.
Well put.
Thank you.
Me too.
Tessa.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
So what else do we need to clarify in order to
Yeah.
have a motion? Anything else, Shay?
I don't think so, you guys. I feel like you covered all of the big questions in here. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything else. Thank you. I guess one side note while you guys noodle on stuff, we are working, staff is working on getting some stormwater regulations together as a follow-up to our stormwater master plan. And I know there were some, we've kind of talked about stormwater a bunch with the neighbors, with the applicant and those I believe will be proposed to council soon. And that will be something, Matt, that we'll need to talk about and work through. I don't know exactly what they're looking like, but the intent of it is to address what Raymond's kind of concern was, that someone could develop, you know, a property pretty densely and add to a runoff issue. And the idea would be that properties need to take care of that themselves and can't be adding to drainage issues or making anything worse or creating an issue. So we can follow up on that, Matt, but hopefully that would address that concern from Raymond on, you know, making anything worse in that area.
Yeah, in communications with Chase about the issue at the corner as well. So
Awesome. Great.
Okay. Shay, just to clarify, you want can we just state including the 4 variances if there's a recommendation of approval?
I don't think you need to include those specifically in the PUD. It's kind of all looped in. So I think agreeing what is, you know, kind of proposed in the staff report, if that's what you're recommending approval of, that's fine. The three kind of, or I think really two issues that I have are restricting short-term rentals to a one-bedroom only, not the full unit, and then staff working on some sort of language with the applicant on a one deed restricted unit to review during the preliminary plat review.
Well stated.
And Shay, it's been a while, but I believe a sketch plan is not a recommendation to council. It's actually a recommendation to approve or disapprove.
Yep, you guys have the final say on sketch plan.
That's what I thought.
Well, I can make a stab at making a motion. I would like to make a motion to approve the sketch plan for block 28, lots 16 through 20 on 283 North Cora Street for Matt McIsaac, with the restriction on short-term rentals to be one bedroom for each unit. And then to have staff work with Matt on the deed restrictions and with the considerations in the staff report to be addressed in the preliminary plat.
Seconded.
Okay, we got a motion, got a second. Any further discussion? Okay, I will poll everybody. Bill?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Jennifer?
Aye.
Thomas?
Aye.
Tessa?
Aye.
Chair is an aye. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Sorry we had to do that again.
All right.
Okay, item number 2, the approval of minutes from June 30th, 2020. Anybody have any issues?
I move we
I'll
approve.
abstain as I was absent.
Okay,
And I'll second John's move to approve.
okay, got a motion, got a second. All in favor of, okay, Bill,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Jennifer, you're
You're-
abstaining. Okay, Thomas,
Aye.
Tessa,
Aye.
Chair's an aye.
Okay.
Anything else?
Anything else, Shay?
No, for me. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Move to adjourn.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good to see you guys.
Okay, okay.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thumbs up.
All right. Cheers.
Thanks all.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night.